5 women I've helped have babies, which is like, there's never going to be any more satisfying output from what I do than that. Becoming qualified in the thing does not set you up for running a business and making that a successful. There is no long-term evidence that 16/8 or any form of long-term fasting is healthy in the long run. There's actually early evidence that it actually increases things like cardiovascular disease risk.
Welcome to the podcast, Lucy.
Thank you.
So we have known each other for 7 years?
2018, so 6.5.
6.5 years or so.
Yeah.
So it might be worthwhile just introducing yourself now as to what you're doing.
Absolutely. So my name's Lucy Patel. This is a funny one. So I'm a project manager and I am also a registered nutritional therapist, which up until very recently has been my my job. For the last 2.5 years, I've been running a business. And I'm actually taking a step back from that now and actually going back into project management. So there's probably a few bits we can talk about from that respect. But I guess it's quite nice that I've now got to a point where I've almost got like 2 careers in a way. And whilst it's not mapped out how I originally planned, I think I'm in a very good place with that now. But yeah, we can talk into the ins and outs of running a business and how that has been for me, but taking a very meaningful decision to step back into project management for a time based on sort of where my life is at the moment, I guess.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the podcast, this is about people giving it a go. Doesn't matter how successful you are, how difficult things are. That's what this is all about, isn't it? And there are sometimes other things that we need to consider. And so this is as relevant as anything. So don't worry about that. And the one thing I was really interested in talking about was nutrition anyway, because you have a particular angle which you ended up majoring in.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we'll chill the beans on that for a sec. So when we met each other, we were both working in corporate world. I was on previous podcasts before, I talked about corporate life and whatever else. And you tend to find within the corporate world, there are people who are skilled, they have personalities. Ask them something and they might ask them a question around what would you like to do? And you always get a different answer. Which is, I would like to be a ski instructor because I'm great at skiing. Or I've always wanted to have a flower arranging business or a nutrition business or a fancy being a PT. You'll find that everywhere you go. All the jobs I've had in the past have always been that. People always want to do the thing that they are really passionate about. But having a regular job, of course, is a means to an end as well.
Absolutely. It's funny because I think it's almost that sliding doors between something that is a passion that most people will spend their life going, if only I'd done that, if I'd gone down that route, become a PT. But I think the older you get and the more responsibilities you end up with, families, mortgages, whatever that might be, and the more, I guess, slightly more rigid you become, you move your way up in said career, it becomes very, very difficult to ever have the bravery to actually jack that in and go, I'm going to go and do something completely different. Because essentially you are starting from scratch. Like when I started, I had to go back to university and do a degree in nutrition, which I was doing alongside working. You're going back to square one from a salary perspective, from an experience perspective. So I am delighted and so happy that I did it, but I completely understand why a lot of people get to a point where they feel so ingrained in the role that they're already doing that the thought of moving away from that, unless they have, incredible financial stability is a big one. I think we've talked about that before. That is, especially at this time, the cost of living crisis, everything is expensive. And a lot of people, when they get to their 30s and 40s, they do have a lot of financial responsibilities. And it would probably seem mad for someone to say, you want to step away from this senior director role at this corporate company and go and earn 16 grand a year as a fledgling, whatever it is that you're doing, plus the fees to get yourself educated and qualified. So, but in a way, it is quite sad though that people do end up parking these passions. And I think a lot of this is how you can maybe bring that passion into your life in a way that it might not be your full-time job, but it's something you can do on the side, or you can get educated on it and help, even if it's your little sphere, your family. You know, with what I do now, I've helped friends, family, myself, which has then had a knock-on impact into how healthy I am and my family. My mum's doing strength training now, which she probably never would have done if I'd have not gone down this path. So even though it's not mapped out in the sense that it's become my full-time job, the ripple effect of me going down that route, if I think about it, it's actually been quite positive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's left an impact. But I think a lot of people probably do feel quite trapped by the fact that as their earnings go up, they end up just with more financial responsibilities. And then that's a cycle that's quite hard to then break out of if you do have this passion project or this job that you really would love to do. But I think there are ways that you can still bring that passion into your life and still live by it. Like you said, if you want to be a PT and, you know, learn about how to look after yourself, get fit, get strong, look after you, look after your family, help your friends. And there's still a way that you can bring that in without it being this huge shift from full-time job to being self-employed, which is quite a leap.
You were always honest with me when we worked together.
I hope so.
Because what you because what you said to me was Mark, two things. One, I'm pregnant.
The day you joined, I was like, by the way.
Yeah. Two, I don't want to do project management. I'm studying to be a nutritionist, so I don't see this being my full-time career going forward. And you were bluntly honest with me, which is great, and I really appreciate it.
And you were hugely positive in response, I remember, Yeah,
well, I admire that.
Yeah.
You know, what's not to like about that? And sure enough, you had your child, and then you pursued your studies. How did that go?
The studying wasn't too bad because so it was 3 years, and it was all distance except for the clinical training that I had to go down to London for. It was all like web-based lectures and assignments and things. So I pre-children, when it was just me, I managed to fit that around the job quite well. And then when I had Isla, I then deferred a year, went on mat leave. The challenging year by far was the second year because I had a young child. I went back to work and then lockdown happened. So I was pregnant in lockdown, studying. And that year was tough because I did feel like I'd overloaded myself with things to do. And then I had my second daughter, Suri, in 2020. Then I had the decision, do I defer for another year while I'm on mat leave, or do I just plough through? We were still in lockdown. And I made the decision to basically, she was born in September the 5th. Third year started September the 20th. So I literally did third year while lockdown at home. We were having housework done as well. So it's just an absolute nightmare. That year was just not a year I would want to repeat. But I'm glad I just wanted to get it done at that point. So I qualified.
You came, it was, what you decided to do though, which was positive, was you reduced your hours when you
yes, I did 3 days a week. Yes, so I did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when I came back after having Isla. So I had Mondays and Fridays to study, which was hugely helpful. But obviously being pregnant for 2 of the 3 years and everything that comes with that in terms of like brain fog and being tired and being sick and stuff, not an optimal setup. And I think in retrospect, whilst I'm still very glad that I did it when I did, I didn't make things I think I could have made things a little bit easier for myself.
Okay. Yeah, but you're hyper competitive in that sense. Well, sorry, not competitive, wrong word. You're driven.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what you are.
Yeah.
And everything, you can resolve all these issues.
And I think looking back now, I think I used to beat myself up because this is what I do about why am I not coping better. But now looking back now, it was like, of course, I was hanging on just about. And I got 2-1, which I was really pleased about. And then I graduated and then I literally quit. I quit where we worked together without much thought. I thought I'm just going to go full throttle into setting up the business. So from September, suddenly I was self-employed.
What year was this?
So this is 2020, September 21. So I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I left my job. I set the business up. And I think the shock factor was even though I was qualified, I think a lot of people that, go out and do qualifications of any nature, becoming qualified in the thing does not set you up for running a business and making that a successful enterprise. You become qualified, but how do you actually then go and sell and market and do social media and, you know, build programs and all the stuff that went with that? So I've been doing continuous training, I've done coaching, I've done extra certifications, obviously in women's health and fertility, which is the route that I went down. So I think the challenge for me was, whilst I felt very, very, you know, from a client result perspective, absolutely, like, couldn't have done any better. It was selling myself, marketing what I do. That's the bit that didn't sit naturally with me, and I found it quite hard to do. And I think that's ultimately why the business didn't grow as fast as I needed it to. But in the 2.5 years that I did it, it was just an absolute privilege there was nothing quite like the feeling of the impact that you're seeing that you are making on people's lives, and especially when it comes to female hormones, you know, when women are struggling to get pregnant and struggling to stay pregnant and having issues with their periods. It was a very intimate relationship that you build with these people. And whilst a lot of that was quite emotionally draining, because people always bring a lot to the table, which is natural, you know, helping, you know, in this year alone, 5 women I've helped have babies, which is like, there's never going to be any more satisfying output from what I do than that. So I think it's something that I do want to, the fertility angle, I think, is what I'm going to return. When I return to all of this again, I think it's going to be fertility is where I'm really going to drill down.
So when you started on the nutrition journey, you'd already made your decision that you were going to get into wellness and nutrition.
Yes.
And I think what I recall from that is it was reasonably general. So you weren't majoring particularly in a particular field.
No.
Because I remember this, because you sort of said, Mark, you know, let's do an MOT.
Yeah.
You know, we had that discussion about do you get headaches? How's your eyesight?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And there was certain things that I needed to tweak at the time. I think I was CrossFitting in those days, so I needed an extra bit of help just in terms of recovery.
Lifestyle
tweaks, some injuries and whatever else.
Yeah.
And being sat at a desk using a keyboard, the posture's awful, especially when you're doing some sort of Olympic lifting. If your shoulders are forward, you're gonna. In fact, I tore my rotator cuff in the end, because of that.
And especially just on that, you know, the advent of home working. So many people are working at completely suboptimal workstations. They're at breakfast bars, they're in bed, they're on the couch. So, you know, obviously when you're working in an office, you have a DSE assessment to make sure that you at least sat in a way that's actually going to keep, like you said, from a posture perspective. But now with home working, so many people, and they're not working at proper workstations. So they're slumped and they're too high, they're too low, you know, but I think, sorry, going back to what you were saying in terms of where you were, the health MOT was when I was dabbling with almost like high-end programs or short-term, more affordable, accessible services. And where I ended up was being much more specific, basically doing hormone support programs for women of a certain age bracket where it's minimum of 3 months support. So that is where I ended up. The health MOTs, I really enjoyed doing those, but it was always quite hard if you don't niche, because you're then trying to become an expert in every single health condition, gender, age group, symptom. Whereas the more you niche down, the people that come to you are all going to be in a much smaller sphere of difficulty. And there's going to be repeat patterns in what you see, you know, whether it's fertility or perimenopause. There's always similarities, rather than saying, you know, if a guy booked a discovery call now and he was 55, I'd probably be like, I'm going to refer you on to someone else, because I'm not the best nutritionist for you anyway.
How did you discover this niche then? So was it because you were getting a response through a particular type of person, or was it a personal experience of yours?
I think it was a bit of everything. So first of all, personal experience, myself, woman, frazzled, mid-30s, children. A lot of my friends, you know, I knew that a lot of my friends were struggling with their cycle, with their periods. They were struggling with fertility. And then the results that I actually got from the clients that saw me were just incredible. And actually seeing that feedback and testimonials was like, this is where I need to position myself.
And these are women in their 30s as well?
Sort of, most of my clients are probably between the age of like 30 and early 40s, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most had families? Or
I'd say 60-40. 60 did, 40 were trying, or were just in the slightly earlier stage where they're like, I want to have a family at some point and I'm worried that their cycle's all over the place, or they've been on the pill for 16 years and they're worried that about coming off it, because when they went on it for, say they were having really bad skin, or they had really bad periods when they were in their teens and they've been on the pill ever since, and they're like, how do I come off it safely, and how do I know that all those symptoms aren't going to come back? So a lot of it was women who were almost knowing that they did want to have a family, weren't quite ready to have one yet, but wanted to do the work now to make sure that when they did start, that they had a predictable cycle, and then they weren't struggling with PMS and all that kind of stuff. So I can't remember what your original question was now. So I think it was a bit of everything. It was a bit of, I felt like I could relate to that group because I am in that group. And I think women are, in many ways outside of health, hugely underserved, underrepresented in research. You know, in research in nutrition and health, you look for studies on women and you'll barely find any, because most of the research and studies, whether it's looking at, you know, like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular health, whatever it might be, they generally use men because women's cycles complicate the results. So women they're very underserved in the workplace, especially when it comes to this. And this was another angle of where I wanted to take the business, was actually going and do more corporate work and actually going into business and saying, do you realise that 2 to 3 out of 10 of your women are probably struggling with PCOS, endometriosis, perimenopause, infertility, and you probably don't know about it. And this could be the reason why they're having issues with productivity, or they're having issues with their stress levels, and they're having days off sick. Because most women will not feel comfortable going to their employer and saying, I need some time off because I've got absolutely excruciating period pain. They'll just say, that's how I've got a sick bug. Because no one feels confident having that conversation, that has to change. So that was a slightly more longer term goal of the business, and something that I definitely want to come back to, because that is, from an impact perspective, I can have a much bigger impact than just one-to-one. One-to-one's great, but you're helping one person at a time. Whereas the corporate side of things, I think a lot of businesses are waking up to, they need to do well-being things in the workplace, but a lot of them are still just doing like, we'll bring fruit in.
Well, the idea is that you want the folk who are coming to work to be as productive as possible, and as creative and as energetic as possible. So
I think a lot of businesses are still focused on, you know, we want people in, we want them doing these fixed hours, whereas at the end of the day, what should actually matter is this person has this role and this job role. If they're doing the work that sits within that role, it shouldn't really matter. And that's a slightly different question. And obviously flexible working is now much more available to people. But I think the issue I see, and back to what you were saying before, you know, a lot of people are now quite isolated. A lot of people are working from home 5 days a week. And this isn't just isolated to women per se, but this like depression and isolation and loneliness and lack of social interaction is not healthy.
Well,
anybody.
One of the benefits of working from home, though, is that you get some flexibility. So, I don't know, you might need to go to the dentist or something.
Yeah.
And you can just go and do it. Or if your child is sick, the chances are you're not going to need to take a day off.
Yeah,
really.
I get that. Most businesses now are fine with, I need to nip out and do this, or I've got a doctor's appointment, which is fine.
One of the things I used to try and do when we worked together was anything like that. It was a no-brainer. I just don't think that you need to take the time off.
Yeah,
I remember
just go.
One of our colleagues were worrying to death because she knew that she needed to get back for the child. I was like, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Just go and do it. You've got a laptop. Maybe you could log in, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think with the advent of COVID and that change of work, some of that might have gone away. The
one huge plus of COVID was how it's changed businesses. Yeah. It's accelerated that whole flexible. Because I remember when I put my request in for flexible working at the place we used to work, and it all went fine, but the nerves, and I was just like, God, is this going to get accepted? And there was talk about, is there job share? But it was like, most people will make sure they will get the work done. It doesn't really matter where they are. Most people, 99% of people won't take will they?
Well, yeah.
I know that there's the odd exception, but I think that's the good thing about COVID is that it absolutely accelerated that flexible working conversation. So now people can work where they want, cutting out unnecessary commuting time. And you're right, from the perspective of women with children, it allows them to do drop-offs and pick-ups. And like you said, it maybe keep on top of a few jobs in their lunch hour. They can stick a wash on or whatever. But I think there's a fine line between that convenience and being around colleagues who you're working with, and that problem solving and that back and forward and that communication, where you're just sat in probably a suboptimal room in your house on your own for most of the time. And again, I think the whole point of the flexible working conversation is finding what works for each individual person, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for my own, we'll get back into the impact on women though still, because there is definitely still a theme. I think certain things, there are certain stresses that you have when you have a young family, or if you're on your own, it doesn't really matter, is they can manifest themselves into these particular types of symptoms, right? But I think women have a unique set of symptoms themselves, which is hormonal, which is periods, which are all those things associated with it, which I just simply wouldn't know, other than I know that you're not very well at the minute, for example. The challenges there, aren't they?
Yeah.
And some of those could be perhaps environmental. I mean, I think there's a challenge when one is going to the office, you've got to get up at 6, the child's got to go to nursery or something, you've got to get out the door.
It's like the schedule has to be like militant with the schedule in the morning. Yeah.
And so by the time you get to work, you're exhausted.
You've already been up for like 3 hours.
4 hours of work before you even started, and you've got to get through the day and everything else. So I think everybody can probably relate to that, but I think there's a certain set of particular issues that we all need to be mindful of. What I was going to say about COVID as well was I think I'm a social animal, really. I think that's what I am.
You are.
I enjoy meeting people, mixing with people. I loved working with teams. And certainly as COVID happened, I was doing a lot of traveling at that time. So it was different countries all the time, whatever else. And when I look back at that, I kind of think, well, even before then, I was traveling down to, say, Fleet or Northampton every day. And when my children were really small, I was driving to Newbury every day, coming back every day, driving to Fleet every day, coming back every day. Yeah. You end up trying to then squash everything in, and I think you're working on a particular set of adrenaline, I would say, probably for about 10 years. But what I was going to say about COVID was I did welcome the sudden stop. We had great weather.
Yeah.
I was like,
first few weeks of COVID lockdown were amazing, weren't they? Everyone was like, this is great.
Yeah, that was really good. And then I think what's happened is, and I've noticed it with my own nutrition and my own health. So I was dedicated to fitness all the way up until COVID. As I say, I've got a couple of little.
I remember you bringing your broccoli into work.
Broccoli, everyone used to shout at me for microwaving the broccoli. So I began eating it cold in the end, so I didn't annoy anyone in the office. Lovely. But what I did notice was that I then created some habits I haven't quite gotten out of yet. And the reason for that was because I ended up, I'm sure this is the case for everybody else, is that those corridor conversations and issue resolution conversations I may have had, which may have taken 5 minutes, became a half an hour meeting in Teams.
Exactly.
So then there
was no spontaneity about, like you said, problem solving, creativity. You can't get that from going, I'll put a Teams meeting in just because I've got you can, but I think that's one of the most dangerous things about working from home, especially if people are starting a new job in a new company. You need to be there. You need to be learning and listening and seeing present. And exactly.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me was just on that theme around everything's managed by teams. There's an assumption that you're just there. So therefore, it doesn't matter if you've got a break in your diary, somebody else wants to have a conversation with you, which ends up whatever. And then I ended up, I think it was spending at least 12 to 15 hours a day, particularly through the middle part of that COVID period, constantly building presentations or working or whatever, and having to work at night and stuff. It was what it was. But what did occur to me was when I sort of came out of that, I definitely began to feel isolated. I felt I'd become isolated. I'd sort of lost that ability
to just have a conversation with people and read them and
so I was kind of began retraining my brain in a way, and what I realized
reintegration into society.
For sure, like in prison for something. And then, but the downside of that was I kind of got a bit more brain foggy. Because Again, I wasn't moving as much. Definitely wasn't going to the gym. But that's self-inflicted. That's on me, right? So those things are restrictions that I've had created myself. And I know that I'm not the only one. So coming out of that, I felt, even though COVID was over a short space of time, which is where I was really interested in talking to you around the nutritional benefits to help you, is because I just think you end up in a bit of a rut. But COVID itself was only for a short space of time. But the impact to me has probably been about 4 years, because you're kind of coming through a process.
Yeah, 4 years
you
now,
then
isn't it?
pop yourself, you sort of stabilize a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you pop out the other end and go, I don't feel the same. I definitely don't look the same. I'm definitely not mixing with people.
Yeah.
And so getting back into that work environment probably isn't a bad thing for a lot of people. So again, but once you've got the brain fog, how do you get through where you've got to start eating better, you've got to start drinking better, you've got to get better sleep.
Yeah.
Turn your laptop off.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing with COVID, is that I think because at the beginning, everyone was focusing on this freedom that we were suddenly afforded, that we didn't have, an hour traveling to work, an hour traveling back from work. We can sort of just be logged on like 5 minutes before our start time. But I think the dangerous thing with that is that everyone's boundaries became very, very blurred. A lot of people who I've spoke to have said that they were sort of just like waking up later, probably not really getting ready, just going downstairs, plonking themselves in front of the laptop in the kitchen. And it's like, even from a routine perspective, and I'm not saying that people should go to work all like done up and in a suit, but there's quite a lot to be said. If you've been in the corporate world for 15 years and you've been used to shower, get yourself into that persona, that work persona, dress nice, get yourself to work. And all of a sudden you sat there in leggings and a t-shirt, you've not really done your hair. And a lot of people said that it really affected almost their productivity, because they didn't feel like they were in that work mode. Because pre-COVID, work was much more boundaried. Yes, you had to travel into work, but then hopefully for most people, you leave the office, you walk in the door, and hopefully most people then aren't logging on the laptop again. But suddenly with COVID, the start of the workday is fluid. No one's really giving you a finish time. You're not really taking breaks. Lunches, you're there like, there's nowhere to go for lunch. You're just raiding the fridge for just whatever's lying around. And all of that routine that I think is actually quite healthy in terms of how you plan a working day, all of that fell away. So whilst there was flexibility and freedom, I think for some people that didn't end up sitting well. And like you said, habits creep in. You've not done a shop. You haven't got, if you work in Manchester, you've got so many healthy lunch options. Yes, they're expensive. But if you're suddenly like, I'll just have toast, or I'll just have whatever, there's just all that planning and preparation fell away. And I think you're right. A lot of people fell into that. They weren't exercising as much, even though they felt like we've got the gift of time. Most people didn't use it well.
Yeah.
So I think now that move back into a bit more of a structured way of living, which work afforded, for some people, that is exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And whether it's 3 days in, 2 days at home, or it's some flexibility, a couple of days at home, I think most people I spoke to, 2 or 3 at home, 2 or 3 in the office, having a nice little bit of a mix. But a lot of people getting changed for work, imagine, right, you're going to work, you're not just sat in front of a laptop in your kitchen in gym gear, that you're probably not going to plan to go to gym, active wear, but not actually going to do anything active in it, which I think is quite funny.
Well, I think that rings true with me. So I made an active decision. I think it was a month in.
Yeah.
I'm going to wear a shirt. And I've got one of those desks that you can sort of wind up and down. So I stood up. Yeah. Put trousers on, all that.
Makes a difference though, right?
Because when you're having a board meeting in your pants, right, and flip
shirt top, and then like dirty jogging bottoms on the bottom, then no one can
I'm just thinking Y fronts. So I sat there in the Y fronts, right?
Well, there's an
having
image.
a conversation. It's not quite the same. You kind of get there's a professional limit here, which I'm not kind of feeling it. I think, so I felt by dressing for that day, I was ready for the day.
Yeah. But it gets you into that mindset. Mindset's everything, isn't it? And when you're wearing a suit, washed your face, done your hair, I feel like I'm change director Mark, rather than Mark who's there and just, like you said, just in a t-shirt, like almost like pretending to be a change director. Do you know what I mean? It's that there's a lot of that. It's almost probably that neural pathway in your brain where you've been doing the same things all your professional life, that that you associate with being that particular version of you. You know, that's how you identify change director. That's the mode I'm in now. And if you're suddenly rocking up and you've not really made the effort, it is going to affect how you turn up. I think some people say like, oh, it doesn't matter what I wear, but I think a lot of people I've spoken to do notice a difference in their productivity and their confidence and how they then go about interacting with, like you said, a senior group of people.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like you look the part.
It's all part of the purpose-driven mentality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which leads us nicely, I think, onto the thread of coming out of COVID and that sort of mental health point where just through the latter part of COVID, we were beginning to employ new people into the business.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, it occurred to me that those people hadn't even been in the office. They'd never even smelt what the point is.
Yeah.
I sort of felt, you know, if you're in tech or whatever, I kind of felt, well, he could be working for a pencil company.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter. We were in financial services or whatever, but it didn't matter because they weren't sort of getting materially as embedded in as part of the fabric of the business.
Yeah.
Because they, again, were on their own. So I do think that coming out of this period, again, some folk may well struggle. They might even be afraid to go to the office, but it will get better.
Yeah.
I do think I agree with you. I think having that box where you go to and you have a purpose together,
absolutely,
you're driven by goals, you're sort of interacting more, you get an idea of the culture of the business. That's got to be great from a mental health perspective.
I mean, I think that's quite interesting, actually. I don't know if you've read, what's the book called now? There's a book called Indistractable.
No, I've not read it.
You'd love it. So basically, I think since COVID as well, and what you've just said there, when you work for a business, it should be more than just a job, right? It should be something that you feel a part. If you've gone to the right company in the right role, it should be more than just a paycheck. It should be something where you feel that you're part of doing something bigger. Now, no matter what industry you're in. And where we used to work, there was a very strong sense of that. You know, the relationships that you had with people, the awareness you had of what the company was doing, where they were going, what they wanted to do next, what wasn't going well. And you felt like you were part of something bigger. Whereas if you're just at home doing your job and almost only speaking to people if it's absolutely necessary, and you suddenly see now, I'm not saying people should stay in a job for 20 years if they don't like it, but people are job hopping a lot more now. I think people are doing like a year, 18 months, which I think, I don't know, is that deemed acceptable these days? Back when I was working, that would have been a bit of an alarm bell for a company to say they're sort of jumping around quite a bit and they're never really settling. And that is a sign for me that person hasn't found the right job. Because I think finding the right company to work for, you learn so much and hone your skills that if you're constantly jumping around, and I think the generation, I don't want to be too generalistic here, but the sort of generation that we're seeing now, this focus and this staying power that people have, there's a lot of want results quick. We want the best job now. Whereas the mentality I went into the working world was that you need to work your way up. You need to work hard, do your best, work your way up. Whereas I think a lot of young people now are like, they want to walk into a 50 grand a year job after uni, and it's like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
if you're in the right, maybe going into investment banking maybe, but it's interesting that this almost the family sense and the community sense that you should get ideally when you join a new company and you really feel part of something, I think that's fallen away now because people are just like, I want the job and the salary, maybe in an industry that interests me a little bit, but I don't know what you think about that. If you think that I'm separating the generation now from my generation, like I'm really old, but I think there's been a huge shift since the sort of late 2000s, which is when I started working, to now, in terms of what young people expect. There's a very big expectancy if we want flexibility and we want freedom. And it's like, I think that's good, but you also need to earn that. You need to, if you're going to go into a business, you need to meet your responsibilities. You need to meet them halfway, right? But I think there's a lot of, I don't know what the word, not disenfranchised. I think young people now have quite a lot of high expectations that they expect to be met.
I think there's a reason for it, which is that there is so much content available to people which that you may see.
Yes.
And what you might see is someone who is in phenomenal physical shape, or already is driving the Lamborghini. And there may be influencers. Yes. So influencers are driven by money as well, right? Yeah. The more successful they are, the better their profile is, the more money they have, and they've got a great house now and everything else. And so there is a wider range of content available in terms of how one could possibly make a living. The second thing I think is that the attention span on that might be, I'm only spending 20 minutes looking at, or 10 minutes, or even 20 seconds looking at this person. I've now got it in my brain, so therefore that's what I'd like, I think. The third, I wonder whether or not there's an issue around seeing perhaps a generation before. So my kids, I'll give you an example. My kids probably saw me working 12, 15 hours a day, coming in late, going in really early, going back again really early. And perhaps even though they understand the work ethic, they might not necessarily want to do that because they could see the physical effect that has in the end. Yeah. Because it's definitely had a physical effect on me one way or the other. I think I'm pretty motivated still, by the way. But all I'm saying is that, there's only so much you can push yourself over that sort of really key informative period of time, which is probably your late 20s and early 40s. You've got this point here where your career, depending upon what you've chosen to do, exponentially increases, and your earning potential increases. But if you are burning the candle at both ends doing that, and you're not in that top 1 percentile of people who are highly intelligent, keep themselves ultra fit, concentrate on one thing only to be successful at that, and that's what they dedicate their lives to, you're going to burn out pretty quickly, I think, into your late 40s and 50s. So I think there's an intellect with young people that are saying, kind of don't want to do that. I've got a number of choices. I can do different things. So I might be able to do 3 things for 3 hours a day and and perhaps earn that lifestyle. Yeah. But I think there's only one issue with it, I think, is that experience is the key. Because when you get street smart and wise, you've learned, you had your eyebrows burned off a couple of times, things haven't gone, you've learned from it. That makes you a better, more valuable employee in a way. Which is where having the experience on the ground works. Because if you want to go from A to F, point F being the ultimate salary, you're going to make all the mistakes from B through to F in that role, and you're probably not going to be in the role for very long. And actually, you get disillusioned with it quite quickly. So I think there is a definite difference in the information people are getting fed to them, and then the motivation in order to then be successful in one thing, I think. Plus also some of the menial jobs are now no longer around. AI is doing a lot of these, or they've been taken care of anyway. Some of the industries have changed. But I think this leads us again nicely into...
Can I just touch on 2 things that you brought up there?
Yeah, please do, yeah.
So first of all, influencers. Oh my word. So I think I read somewhere, I think it was on, I can't remember what I was reading the other day, that I think it was the top 2 jobs that teenagers say that they would want now is to be an influencer, as in a job, be an influencer. Now, first of all, that highlights a lot of issues with social media, because that could be a conversation in itself, to be fair, but social media usage and the impact that it's having on young people, I think it's completely disillusioning them as to what reality. Yes, there's influencers there who claim that they do 4 hours a week of work and they're sunning themselves on a beach. There has to be a heavy dose of reality here in terms of what your career is likely to look like. Yes, some people will have that lifestyle, but you don't know what their background is. They could come from shitloads of money. And I think young people wanting to be an influencer as a job, almost because it looks really easy, that worries me. I've got 2 young girls, so I'm always ever conscious of where this social media conversation's going, albeit mine are way off getting to that point at the moment. But I think I think we need to teach young people that you do have to start. You have to find something you love and you have to work your way up. So whilst I agree that I would never condone 12, I don't think anyone should be working 12 to 15 hours, because there's either an issue with the set of responsibilities that you're doing, and there needs to be more support for you. But from a productivity perspective, like, I know that I probably get 70-80% of my work done pre 1 p.m. because I'm a morning person. I know that my afternoons are slower. Yes, I will be logged on till 9 to 5:30, but everyone has the sweet spot of when they're actually most productive, and I think productivity is more important than hours. If you just smash, and people get so distracted, especially when they're at home. People reach for their phone, quickly check Instagram or the news, not really sure what they're checking it for, but it takes your brain 22 minutes to refocus back. So if you think you're just quickly looking at your phone, you're not quickly looking at your phone. You completely distracted yourself from what it is you were supposed to be doing. And now you need your brain to give it 20 minutes to get back in the zone of what it is you're supposed to be doing. So the whole, where young people's careers are, and obviously with AI and that, where God knows where that's going to go, I think there has to be an element of reality that young people still need to focus on I'm not saying go to university, but get as educated as you feel comfortable and that you're able, but then find a route, find a passion, and learn, experience, educate yourself, learn from people older than you, more experienced than you. Don't rely on learning from influencers on Instagram. The other thing I wanted to say was what you just said about that whole career span. And again, going back to the women's angle, I think this is where women are most vulnerable. So when they get to that late 30s, early 40s stage, they've worked their way up the career ladder. Maybe they're at like senior level, director level, they might have a team, and then all of a sudden they've got young children. And they might have parents that suddenly need looking after more. These parents might not even live close to them. They might suddenly find that they're like my mother-in-law is at the minute, having to drive down from Birmingham to London every other weekend to help care for elderly relatives. And the life burden that women have at that vulnerable period, which for me is around the 40 mark, is huge. They're probably still doing, no offence guys, most of the unpaid domestic duties. I think that's changing, but in terms of the laundry and the cleaning and the childcare and the where does my child need to be today, take her to a party, whatever it might be. And you've said about the impact that those hours have had on your health. When women then get to perimenopause and their hormones start going up and down, which is going to happen, they suddenly become so much more heavily impacted by that, because for the past 10 years they have just been burning themselves out, barely an hour to themselves. It's work, it's kids, it's housework, it's trying to keep all of those plates spinning. And I think that's where a lot of women feel that they just have that bam, early 40s. They're like, what on earth has just happened? My weight skyrocketed. I can't concentrate anymore. Everyone's annoying me. And whilst it is hormonal, for me, the hormone, that's going to happen anyway. It's almost like what baseline are you going into that perimenopausal transition on? If you're going into that healthy, active, self-care's on point, you probably find that you're going to have a much better experience. And I know we've sort of gone a little bit on a tangent there. We're going into the women's health angle again, but I think the message from me is that it's never too soon to do the work. If you're 30, if you're in your 20s, the strength training, the sleep, the self-care, the boundaries around your work, it's never too soon to put those in place.
There's more women working in their 60s as well, aren't there now as well? So even then now, you're seeing in fact, some women are coming into work in the late 50s, 60s. Guess what? Cost of living crisis is higher. Exactly. Not everybody is mortgage free. So you've got the challenge there as well.
And a lot of women in their 40s, they've got young kids. Women are having children a lot later now. They might be hitting perimenopause and they've got a 3-year-old at home. Whereas when my mum went into perimenopause, I think me and my brother were left. She had when 21 and 24. That's changed as well. So all of a sudden, if you look at a woman's life now compared to 50 years ago, she's got so much on her plate. It's just ridiculous, and society hasn't caught up in terms of our childcare in the UK is the most expensive. Our flexibility is getting better, but it's still not as good as some places. And I think that's why we need to support that group of women, because they're the mentors to the next generation. I don't want my daughters to look at me and go, all we remember is that you were stressed and you were just frazzled and snappy. I'd hate it if that is the lasting memory that they had of me being a working mum. I want them to look at a working mum and go, that looks fun. It looks enjoyable. It looks manageable. So I think we need to be careful that the women of, of my age, late 30s, early 40s, we are modelling to these 18-year-olds coming through. And are they looking at us and going, that looks awful. I don't want to work in an office. I don't even know if I want kids in a job. Do you know what I mean? And like I said, that's a decision. I'm not saying everyone should want to have kids, but I worry about what messages we're giving to the next generation, because we are, in the 90s, it was all the you can have it all. That was when women, a couple of generations ago, women weren't working, right? Or it was very rare that a woman was working. Now we're the generation, my generation, is almost the what's the word? We're the first generation that came out of that you can have it all, you can have a job and have a family and boss girl and all the rest of it. And now we're all knackered because we've tried to do it all. And it's like, there has to be some balance there, but we need to be very careful that we're not just expecting women to do everything, full-time job, full-time childcare, all the wraparound care, all the stuff that comes with that, and expect them to then be healthy and happy and good partners and have time for their part. You know what I mean? It's like there has to be a shift there. And I think a lot of that shift is that parity with partners. If you've got two adults both working, there has to be 50, it has to be parity with all of the other bits and bobs that come with life, and making sure that women are getting that support.
Yeah. Great team. There was, I remember back in the 90s, even, I'll be in my 20s then, was just around seeing a woman who was frazzled in work. There was always she's having one of those women moments days. Thankfully, that sort of attitude has gone.
Yeah, well, it's going, but yeah, thankfully.
I hope it's gone. I hope so, because
she's just hormonal. Oh, it's the time. All of that derogatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just excused it.
Yeah.
Which I think mostly is gone, but I'm sure it's still.
I do think there's a case of what's the team effort.
Yeah.
If you are in a relationship, then what is the team effort in order to make life good for you? Yeah. And the one thing I do recall was I was just thinking about what your children may see when they see you, for example. Well, I remember thinking exactly the same about my own parents. As interesting as my childhood was in those days, but I remember seeing them and thinking, God, you are stressed, and you're not seeing me at all.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is the nice house and the nice furniture and everything else, but you're not seeing me. Hello, and so I wanted to not do that, but I did end up doing that in a sense, which is I ended up working hard because, I thought my parents would be proud to see what I was achieving, be it materially. So I ended up, in my early 20s, becoming materially driven, probably very similar to people wanting to be influencers, very materially driven.
Yeah.
Wanting my parents to see that I was doing well, but I definitely didn't want to try and work the 20 hours, but I did. I ended up doing it accidentally. So I think there's a lot in what you're saying, is that what one has to realize is that when you get to your 40s, when you're in your teens, 40 seems really old. It isn't. You are in the middle of your life, full of, by the way, you're still full of energy, really still
ideally,
creative. You've got loads of ideas.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people are starting new ideas.
You're absolutely healthiest when you're 40.
For sure.
No reason for that not to be the case. But you're right. And I think going back to whether it's intentional or not, and obviously, we're all shaped by the experiences we have with our parents and everything. But like you said, that's striving to be successful, that's striving to achieve, especially if you are like a people pleaser type, like I was. And I grew up with like single parent family. We didn't have a lot of money. And I wouldn't say that I've ever been like particularly like financially ambitious, but I think I've definitely always wanted to try and, like you said, just drive and try and like do as well as I can. But then, like you said, you get caught up in the whole, their house, those clothes, that holiday. And that's the sound. Unfortunately, we live in a very consumerist society where it's all about stuff, isn't it? It's like, what stuff do you have? What car are you driving? Yeah. And it can be very hard to pull away from that and go, what actually makes me content? And most things that make people content are free. Getting a cracking night's sleep, going for a walk, having some time, having one-on-one conversations with people you like, having interesting conversations like this. I know you had to hire the studio, but technically this is a free conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think going back to what you were saying before about people's passions and how they sit alongside, you might have a job that is something you enjoy, but that's very much there to, keep you afloat. It's like, what passions do you have outside of that? What creative pursuits do you have? Is it fitness? Is it artistic? Is it music? Things that add that extra vein to your life, so you're not just mum and whatever job you have. And that's the limit of your identity. It's like, what else do I have? And you ask women, if you said to a woman, you've got 3 hours to do whatever you want, what would you do? They'd probably just be like, what? Like, I have no idea. Probably have a sleep, lie down. They'd probably say, do some laundry. And it's like, no, that's not a valid answer. But I think it's trying to find and explore, or like what you've done, the trajectory you're on now with all of these extra passions and pursuits that you have. They can all be done together, and they can all sort of complement each other. They don't have to be like, I'm going to stop that and do this now.
Yeah.
You can do lots of things. And I think going back to what you were saying about the career mindedness of the 20-year-old, this portfolio career where it's, I'll do a bit of that and a bit of that. That's fine. Split your time and do different things, but they require work. They require focus and effort. Nothing is just going to get handed to you. And I think it's being quite meaningful and not just jumping around and going, I did that for 6 months, didn't like it, I'm going to go and do something else now.
Yeah, there's some staying power required.
I think that's important. Staying power and focus and consistency, whether it's career or health. We just talked about, the consistency is the one word that I constantly go back to with clients. It's like, this isn't about just doing these things for the duration of their time with me. It's doing them. These are lifelong habits that we're setting here. And there's always going to be bumps in the road, but it's trying to work, and the whole habit forming and habit breaking is just a fascinating area. It's like how that happens and how the best way to break habits and replace them with new ones, stick them to something you already do, so you've got more chance of success. And I think, like for me, sleep is a huge one, and I think especially after having kids and being sleep deprived, it's one thing I would never ever ever sacrifice now. I would not sacrifice a good night's sleep.
I find it difficult.
Wouldn't. I'm too programmed now. 9:30, I'm literally, my body just shuts. I'm like, I'm going to bed. It's like, but I know good. How much better. I think a lot of people sacrifice sleep because they think that having less sleep makes them more productive. It's like more awake time makes me more productive.
The body likes routine, though, you see.
Oh my word, absolutely.
I think I've just sort of alluded that I'm not very good at it, and I think the difference with me is that I don't. I think I sleep fitfully sometimes.
Yeah,
for whatever reason that is. But what I have found has definitely improved it is if I have a time, I go, right, I am going to bed at 10.
Use your phone. My phone goes into dark mode. All of my apps turn off. It's like, there's literally it's time to go to bed. And the more you train your body to do that, you'll find that you're literally just, there'll be a point, literally 9:15. I just feel my brain just go, so it's like shutting down. It's like, that's the time to go to bed. But I think people almost need to switch that mentality round, rather than if I sleep less, I'll have more awake hours and I'll get more done. It's like, if you invest in a cracking night's sleep, you are going to be so much more productive and energized the next day. Do you know what I mean? Rather than, an extra episode of Netflix and suddenly you're going to bed at 11:30, 12 and you're up at 6:30. It's like, that's not enough sleep. And especially women, when they get to that 40s, that perimenopause, sleep can be something that suddenly becomes very tricky. So investing in it now and getting it on point is definitely going to serve you in the long run. So
you had all of these themes in your mind when you were interested in nutrition and it was wellness, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't specifically, as I said, it wasn't about women. It was in general. But then what you found is that probably based upon some of your experiences and your friends, you've realised, goodness me, there's half the population here are like walking around like zombies, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm wondering why this can't be normal. Just a sidetrack slightly, when I clicked over 50 years old, I did notice a difference, and it was weird. Yeah, and I think it's the muscle mass changes.
There's andropause, which is not something I know much about, but there's hormonal changes with men as well.
Yeah, the hormonal changes and things. So you have to work slightly differently. I can't expect to be the same as I was at 20, but if I take that in my own hands and I try and sort it out, then I have to do things. You can't do things the same all the time. You have to adapt, right? So when so this is what you did with the business, and I think there are probably three things in my mind which I'd like to try and touch on if we can. The first one is then what has been the approach in terms of getting to that identifying the issues women have with premenopause, and how do they identify that perhaps they may be, whether they'd like to talk about it or not, they are approaching that, and the things that they can do to try and help themselves, but for other people maybe who are listening to recognize. And then I think that then takes us, I think we've probably got the other one around the business itself, which is probably where we touched up in the beginning, which was it's quite difficult to maintain that self-employed business, and you're not going to be rich straight away, and you have to work at it for years and years sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes to do that. So I think it'd be quite good to that. But let's but I think thinking through then around that, what you've recognized in women, how did that twig with you then, and then what advice would you give somebody who's potentially experiencing these things?
I think a few of the first 4 or 5 of my very first clients were probably between the ages of about 38 and 44-ish. All in. Now, the tricky thing with, like, when everyone talks about perimenopause is obviously it's going to happen for everyone, but it can be quite hard to work out, am I perimenopausal or am I just not sleeping properly? I'm overly stressed. So for me, what I've tried to do is almost not try and position perimenopause in this sort of like, there's a lot of blame attached to perimenopause. It's like perimenopause is the cause of all of my troubles. Perimenopause is a process just like anything else that's going to happen to you as you age. So I've been trying to encourage, because I saw that a lot of my friends weight was a big one. They were suddenly like, I'm eating the same things, I'm exercising exactly the same, and yet my weight is creeping up slowly and steadily. My weight is increasing. They're like, why? And then they started eating less, interestingly enough. So they were skipping breakfast, they were having a salad, and then they were having soup, and they were like, my weight is still going up. What the hell's going on? Now, you probably know this, but this is where we get into the conversation of metabolism, and it gets a little bit tricky, because your metabolism is what drives how you use energy. So everything that you eat, it's your metabolism that's almost where that is almost deciding where is it stored, is it used as energy, how is it being processed, how is it being used. And when you get to perimenopause, because your estrogen's up and down, this can affect your thyroid. So there's a whole biochemical link into what is happening as your hormones flux, as they go up and down. This is having an impact on all. It's not just your, if everything's perimenopause, it's affecting your cycle. It affects everything. It's a systemic process. The brain fog, the joint aches, all these different things. Now, whilst your hormones going up and down is going to happen regardless, I think, and what I've seen in practice, is that earlier you can set a really good set of lifestyle and dietary practices, so that by the time you actually get to perimenopause and your hormones, they don't just suddenly change overnight. They will just start to become a little bit more unpredictable. Your cycle might suddenly become a day shorter or 2 days shorter. It might suddenly become slightly longer. It's a process, right? 4 to 5 years is the average time a woman will be in perimenopause. So it's not a 4 to 5 years where you can really afford to be feeling rubbish until it finishes. We want women to be going through perimenopause and going, I've noticed a few changes, but because I'm living a good life and maybe taking the right supplements, which can be a really big one as well. So where I generally start with clients is we get the dietary side sorted first. And what I tend to find is that I end up getting them to eat more. A lot of them are under eating. They're eating the wrong foods, and they're eating most of their calories in the second half of the day. So they're backloading rather than front loading. So I get all of my clients front loading: big breakfasts, decent lunch, conservative dinner. Eating window of about 11 to 12 hours, no more. So having a 12-hour fast every single day, which is a really nice way of then interrupting that late night snacking, that 9 p.m, I feel like having a biscuit. So I try and get my clients onto no more than a 14-hour fast. And again, what a lot of my clients are trying is they're going too hard with the fasting. They're doing 16-8 or they're doing 5-2, which is very, very drastic fasting. And when your hormones are up and down, the worst thing, and I cannot stress this enough, there is no long-term evidence that 16-8 or any form of long-term fasting is healthy in the long run. There's actually early evidence that it actually increases things like cardiovascular disease risk of diabetes. So fasting, 14-hour fast window maximum. So that would be 6 p.m. till 8 a.m., 7 p.m. till 9 a.m. That's relatively reasonable for most people. 12-hour minimum. Front load, make sure you're having protein with every single meal, including breakfast. This is where protein powder can be really helpful because a lot of women struggle. They're dashing to work, they're dashing around, trying to get 20 grams of protein in your breakfast can be a struggle. So really good protein powders can be really helpful there. And I think a lot of this, going back to what we were saying with COVID, it's planning, it's prep. It's so easy to get caught short and go, there's nothing in, I'm just going to have a piece of toast. Or I'm just going to grab something from Costa because it's there and it's convenient and I haven't got anything else with me. So it's having handy snacks, it's having nuts, things that are really easy grab and go. So focusing on protein and then strength training.
So if we have breakfast, what you're saying is avoid sugar.
As in sugar. Yeah, have some
as in
carbs,
sugar,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
or no like sugary cereals or.
So what would a breakfast look like? Because again, we're all busy people, right? So you might say, look, is that what eggs and beef or something? What is it?
Eggs and beef. That
what
sounds quite nice.
Yeah, that's what
Is that what you have? Yeah. So I think in terms of quick breakfast, the three probably that I most commonly put on people's plans is Lizzie's granola, do a high protein, 17 grams of protein per portion. Throw some yogurt, some berries and some flaxseed on there. Absolutely sorted. If you've got time to cook, 2 eggs, bit of avocado, bit of salmon, toast. Again, that probably takes 4 minutes to make. Or make a smoothie. If you literally need something that you need to blast and get in the car, get a really good protein powder, throw in some spinach, a bit of avocado, some oat milk, some berries, some banana. It's the only issue I have with smoothies is that it's already, because it's drinkable, there's a lot of that digestive process and that hunger hormones don't actually kick in as well. But if you are literally needing to get in the car because you've got to drive for an hour, that is probably your best shout. And I've done that with a lot of clients who are very busy, where they're literally like, I don't have time. We go for the smoothie option for breakfast. But then you can augment that with snacks. And then maybe mid-afternoon they have like a kind bar, just something with lots of nuts in it, rather than like a Belvita, which is like oats, or even a lot of the healthy brands, like a lot of the, I'm not going to say the brand, a lot of them are very oats. It's like dates and syrup and oats, very carb heavy. Great. It's better than a chocolate bar, but it's not going to sustain your energy for more than a couple of hours.
Yeah. It's the carbohydrates and the sugars, isn't it, that actually creates the cravings.
Yeah, because protein doesn't spike your blood sugar, but carbs do. And oats, and so if you're having like oats in a granola, that is going to give you a nice, with protein and with healthy fats, that's going to spike your blood sugar much more gently, and have that drop is going to be much more gentle than having a bowl of cornflakes, which is going to give you a nice sharp boost for about an hour and a half, but then you'll come crashing down, and then you end up in that blood sugar cycle where you're then like craving carbohydrates because your blood sugar's dropped too low. And that's when you're probably then going to be like, white bread sandwich, crisps.
Yeah.
And I need some chocolate at 3:30. And then I need a snack while I'm cooking dinner. So, and then you end up basically over-consuming carbs, over-consuming sugar, not getting enough protein. And for my perimenopausal clients, protein, healthy fats. A lot of them, it's mentality. They're like, fats? Should I be eating fats? It's like, yes, you should. The right ones. And it's planning and prep. It's making sure you know what you're having for lunch, you know what you're having for dinner. It's using Sunday just to get up ahead, making a massive batch of, like quinoa salad you can make in 10 minutes. Just throw a load of stuff in there, cook up some chicken, have a can of tuna. It doesn't have to be complicated or spending hours in the kitchen, but it's having some go-to meals that are transportable, things that you can just grab out of the fridge if you're working from home and you're busy, so you don't end up going down the route of just making sandwiches on end, and then, like I said, snack, all the way through the day.
So what you're doing is you're starting to balance everybody's day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then having a pretty hard stop. Obviously, okay, if you're going out for a meal, it might be different, but from 7, 8 p.m, you don't need to be eating, but you're going to be going to bed soon. So when people are having massive dinners, it's like, where's that energy going? It's not going anywhere.
In Japan,
you're literally going to go and lie down and sleep. So where is that energy getting expended? It's not, so it's going to get stored.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, whereas you have a big breakfast, and even if you sat at a desk, you're still moving around, right? Your brain uses a lot of your energy. Whereas having your biggest meal of the day 2 hours before bed, when you're literally about to lie down and do nothing and be motionless for 8 hours, it just doesn't make sense. So it's switching that mentality. I think in the UK we've got this big dinners, big heavy piled plates. It's almost switching it. Big breakfast, decent lunch, smaller main meal, and then not snacking afterwards can make a huge difference. And I think with perimenopause, weight loss is often slow. So if someone has 3 stone to lose, I'll be totally honest, I'll be like, it's going to take you more than a year to do that. But if you could just lose 1 to 2 pounds a month, you lose over a stone in a year. And that's where you have to get people on board with that. This is a lifestyle. This isn't a quick fix diet that you've got out of a magazine where I'm going to lose 3 stone in 12 weeks. If they want to do that, there's other means of doing that, but there will not be long-term success. You can go to Slimming World, but I've seen no long-term success with Slimming World or Weight Watchers. Give it 2 years, the weight's back and more.
So you've got to maintain it. So it
has to be life. That's where we talk about lifestyle
like that
changes.
Has an impact for the good.
Yeah,
and then you have to then maintain it.
It's consistency. It's slower early gains, but if you're looking at I want to be healthy in 20 years, you have to do slow weight loss. Any drastic weight loss, your body does not want to be losing weight or gaining weight quickly. It wants to maintain an equilibrium. You'll probably find that most people's weight, it doesn't stay the same. You've probably got a threshold where you've got a low end and a high end, and you generally find it quite hard to go below a certain weight. If you go on a holiday, most people say, I'll put on a few pounds. But they didn't put on a stone.
It's probably water, isn't it?
Yeah, there's all sorts of differences. Your gut becomes a bit sluggish or a bit overexcitable, depending on which way things go for you. But your body won't generally drastically put on weight or lose weight very quickly unless you're unwell. Obviously, that's when you need to go and see the doctor. So I think doing things like Slimming World, when women are suddenly like, I need to lose this weight quickly, I'm always like, just think long term here. Don't think of the next 6 months. Think of where you want to be when you're 50. You have to try and attach a much more longer positive goals to weight loss than just, I want the number to go from here to here by this date.
So I
think
think
not going to maintain anybody, because then you get there and then you're like, what now?
I think that there is something to be said about the quick fix.
Yeah.
In that regard, and where you're talking about specifically about women as well, premenopause and in the menopause, that's where if you've made the lifestyle choices at the beginning, it's going to be a much easier journey for you. I was going to say about
just quick on the weight loss thing. What's interesting is if you ask someone, how long has it taken you to put this weight on, and they'll be like, oh, it's taken the last 2 years, 3 years. It's like, why on earth do you think you can lose it in 4 months? You have to I'm not saying it will take as long, but if someone's weight has been creeping up for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's like you have to give your body a chance to safely, healthily lose that weight again.
Yeah.
So trying to just lose it all quickly, like you said, it'll be water, it'll be muscle, your metabolism's going to crash. So as soon as you start eating like a normal person after whatever quick fix diet you're on, the weight is going to pile back on again.
Yeah.
Because your body's just going to be like, it's going to hang on to it. Yeah.
What happens what happens? So if you've had a more of a sugary breakfast in the morning, you get this spike, don't you? You can almost see it on a spike.
So for an hour and a half, you'll probably feel fine because you've had that literally fast release. All of those carbs have been easily absorbed, easily broken down, sucked into your bloodstream. So your blood sugar goes up quite quickly. But then it'll start to come down, but it'll come down just as fast because there's nothing else. It's literally just sugar. You've not had protein. So the carbs, when you eat, everything ends up in your stomach together. And then when it gets into your small intestine, it's the protein, the fats, and the carbs all together. And if all of that energy is being slowly dissipated into your bloodstream together, then your blood sugar is going to go up much, much more slowly. Whereas, let's talk as a drastic measure, if you had a can of Coke, which is basically sugar, all of that is going straight through your stomach. It's not attached to anything else. It's sucked straight into your bloodstream. Blood sugar spikes. You probably feel great for an hour and a half. But then once all of that energy is used, there's nothing left. So you'll crash. And because that crash hits quite hard, your body isn't there going, I'm craving a really nice balanced meal of protein and healthy fats and carbs. It's like, I need sugar. I need to get that blood sugar back up again. And which is a common, I've been in that cycle before, in periods of stress, and it's just toast crumpets, especially when I was when I was pregnant. But you can bring that pattern back so easily, really quickly. If you just start eating more balanced meals, you can get out of that cycle in like a couple of weeks.
And regularly, and you could do it. You could eat 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 5.
So I try not to dictate, because I think there's two camps. They've got your grazing, and then if you've got your 3 meals a day. For me, I don't think it matters too much how you spread those out. If you can have 3 distinct meals, that's great. But if you then need some nuts mid-afternoon, because sometimes people have lunch at 12, they might not be having their evening meal till 7. So it stands to reason that at 4 o'clock they might be getting a bit peckish. But as long as they're eating the right things, you know, some low sugar fruit or some yogurt or some nuts, whatever it is, it's like that's not going to have an impact on your overall weight, because you're eating them at the right time, you're having a conservative portion, you're having that snack at the right time of the day. So I'm not against snacking at all. And sometimes, again, I think with health, I think people have become a bit black and white, as in like, I must do it this way. And if I deviate from that way, even for a day, I failed. What's the point? Some days you might be back-to-back meetings, so you're like, I need to have a grazing day because I'm not going to get a chance to sit and have a meal, but I'm going to graze on the right things, that's fine. And then the next day you might be working from home. Right, I can have a breakfast and a lunch and a dinner today. So I think we've become so black and white, you know, about what diet you're following, and are you vegetarian, and it's like, it doesn't really matter as long as you're eating the right things, minimally processed, you're having fats, protein, carbs, you're exercising. There can be quite a lot of fluidity in terms of how you do that. So I think people become so rigid with wanting to do it a certain way because they followed someone's plan. You know, they followed a Slimming World or a fitness plan, and the minute they deviate, they feel that they've failed. But I try to encourage just, you know, flexibility with how you eat and how you exercise. Obviously, routine's great, but it's fine that you don't do the same thing every single day, because then you're telling your brain you failed. If you just for one day fall away slightly, it's like you haven't failed. You've just done things a little bit differently today, and that's fine.
So proteins help you burn energy, don't they? So you, if you have a higher protein in your diet, I think
the hardest macro to absorb.
So
to break down, it takes a lot of energy.
Your body works at it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it takes a lot of work for your body to actually break down all of that protein into teeny particles for them to be absorbed. So if you're eating protein with carbs, it all gets meshed together. So you haven't just got carbohydrates on their own anymore. They're all tied into this, well, mulch basically, once you've digested it in your stomach.
Well, the carbohydrate is a transport mechanism for the protein, isn't it? So you need an element of carbohydrate in order to transport the proteins. Because if you were just having protein,
some people follow very like low carb, no carb diets, which I don't endorse at all. But the thing with protein is there's no fast release energy hit, and also it's so important for muscle repair, muscle building. So again, most women are not eating enough protein. 1 gram per kilo body weight is the goal. If you're just trying to maintain, especially in perimenopause, your muscle mass starts to decrease from around 30, 35, a lot earlier than some people think. And that's when women start to notice, you know, under their arms, and they just feel like they're losing that sort of tone and shape. Mm-hmm. And you're only going to get that if you eat protein and strength train.
Okay.
Yeah. So strength training for 2 hours a week.
So let's get into that then. So you've got a balanced approach, so you're maintaining your blood sugars as well, that, which is important, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're getting sleep, which is important, and again, people with young families, you know, trying to get to that sleep, but you need to try and hit that.
Yeah.
Don't watch Netflix, just go to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8 hours.
Before we get onto the strength training, which I do want to talk to you about, can we just talk about water?
Yes.
So whilst it's obviously linked to this, but I've learned to take salts or electrolytes now with water, because what I found is when, especially when I was super training, is I was just depleting my body all the time. And then I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I need something. The water in my body is not water.
Yeah.
There's hydrogen, for example. There's salts. There's all sorts in it. So
you've got potassium.
Right.
God, what else? I know this. You got potassium, chloride. Like you said, there's all sorts of salts in your body that have to be in quite a careful balance.
Yeah.
And they dictate how much water you retain and how much water you your body lets you lose. And you're right, like I only very recently started taking electrolytes because I was just exercising and then just drinking loads of water afterwards. Yeah.
So try and replenish the body
what's
with
lost.
what it needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'll take electrolytes in the morning, particularly because you don't know how much you've sweated overnight, for example, or whatever you've been
breathing,
doing. Or even breathing, yes, exactly. So I have that in the mornings, and it sort of I don't get that tired issue at 2:00 anymore.
Yeah.
Just by doing that, that seems to have helped as well.
Yeah.
So
that's really good. Even though they found that link, and often it's finding what is it that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it could be caffeine because they're heavily caffeinated in the morning,
Yeah.
and then they get to 2:00 and they're like, oh my God. It could be sugar, it could be electrolyte, and that's part of this whole. I really encourage people to be curious about what's going on with their body, because it's like your body is, I mean this in the nicest way, it's your responsibility. No one is going to look after your body for you, but your body is what's going to get you to do, it's going to allow you to do everything that you want to do in life. And as soon as things start to fall down, and a lot of people start to experience this far too young, in my view, you know, they get to 40s and they're creaking and aching and overweight, and they're like, all these things that they would ideally want to be doing with their life. They're like, well, I can't do that now. At 40, and like you said, halfway through your life, right? Yeah. You could have 40 years ahead of you. And I think get curious and experiment and just work out what is it that makes you tick, because everyone is different, but the principles are going to be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Good sleep, protein, movement, exercise, relaxation, you know, they're not going to be any different. But you found that was probably the turning point, that you've realised it because you're exercising and you weren't replacing those salts, and you found the solution yourself. But a lot of it is just exploring what works.
Yeah, I think most people know when they consume something they shouldn't be, they know it's not going to be good for them. But I think it's having that again mentality, which is, if I don't want to feel shit every single day, then I need to stop putting shit into my body.
So much easier said than done. I think that's the problem. Like most people, if I asked anyone on the street, describe a healthy meal, everyone would know. You know, they'd be like, some vegetables and some chicken or whatever. But then you're like, well, why are people not eating this food? Why are people not having that for dinner? It's because they're stressed and they're tired.
Yeah, time constrained.
They just don't want to cook. It's the last thing they want to do at the end of the day. Yeah. So whilst most people know that exercise is good, right? And yet a lot of people aren't exercising. So you have to go a bit deeper and go, what is it that's getting in the way for you personally? Is it that you don't know what kind of exercise to do? Is just going to the gym terrify you? The thought of walking into a gym, because a lot of people's confidence, especially women, is on the floor. The thought of walking into a gym on their own, they're like, not a chance. So you have to find ways of going, well, how can we do workouts at home, and what might you need to do that, and where are you going to get that set up? What time are you going to do it? What time are you going to have the most energy? So you have to work through that, rather than say you need to start going to the gym. I would never say that to anybody. You have to go, well, how is exercise going to fit into your life? Easiest, doing something you love. Don't do yoga if you hate yoga. What do you like doing?
Yeah,
do that.
We had
with someone, go on your own. You know, do you want it to be a social thing, or do you want it to be a time where you're just in your head and just having some downtime? And you have to do all of that work to find what's actually going to work and give you the best chance of doing that multiple times over the course of a week, over a month, over a year.
We had a couple of guys on, MMA guys, and they said the parents tried to take them swimming and they hated swimming.
Yeah, I hate swimming.
Hated swimming.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to go. Yeah. Don't want to do it, but I'd rather do this instead, which they absolutely loved. So find that thing that makes you buzz. If you like running, go running.
I've just got back into running after a big hiatus.
Well, movement's so important. Yeah.
And fallen back in love with it. 6 years I didn't run because of kids and whatever else. And like I said, I've just signed up for a half marathon in October, and running is, the fitness is second. It's the headspace and the fact that you can literally just leave the house whenever you want. You put your trainers on and you just go. There's no preparation needed. And for me, it's time away. It's headspace. It's thinking. And I think that's, a lot of people need that, rather than just the pressure to go to the gym to lose weight. It's like, what other joy and happiness can you get from that experience than just, I need to lose weight? Because that's not a particularly motivating reason for a lot of people, because we just said weight loss can be slow. Is there a sense of community that you can get, you know, like with CrossFit, you know, the camaraderie and the accountability that you get from other people can be really, really helpful. So you actually want to go. You're not going because, I need to go, I should go, I want to go. And that's the goal with anything, really, isn't it?
Well, you mentioned weightlifting as well, and I think you get that buzz from that as well. So because you can feel the body burning all the time, can't you? Well, talking about CrossFit, funnily enough, there was so many women undertaking CrossFit, and I think that because they had a gymnastics background, CrossFit has like a functional element to it, a Olympic weightlifting element to it, and then a gymnastic element to it. So you get the different types of movement and functions together. So you're not doing the same exercise together. And the women there were awesome. And they're all different ages, in great shape, didn't have like the issues at the back of the arms you just mentioned, or anything. Again, not that we want to promote CrossFit necessarily, but I would do, because even it's called High Rocks, I think it's called as well.
Latest, isn't it?
So you've got people in great, and it is no coincidence, is it? But what's the benefit of weightlifting then? Would you say at a particular age?
So age-related muscle loss is going to happen to all of us, but for women it kicks in sort of like 30, 35. And if you don't challenge those muscles, they will just, and especially if you're in a sedentary job, which a lot of us are, your muscle mass will just start to drop off. Now, from a long-term perspective, your muscles are responsibility for your mobility, stability, flexibility. So, when you get to the later years and you're in your 70s, when the biggest cause of hospitalisation in women in their 70s is falls. It's falling over because the muscles have just and their bone density and all the rest of it. So basically, strength training will challenge your muscles and it will help those muscles to grow and get bigger. You won't get hench from just lifting dumbbells at home. And this is another fear that women have, is that they're going to get big. It's like, I strength train twice a week and I'm definitely not big. And your bone density also starts to, so osteoporosis, again, the sort of incidence of osteoporosis increases dramatically when women go past 40. And again, using those muscles and challenging those muscles helps that bone density and the muscle mass as well. So, and you're not going to get that from cardio. And you're not going to get it from anything that there are certain types of like yoga and Pilates that are sort of do challenge the muscles, but it can just be body work, resistance exercises. It doesn't have to be lifting weights. It can be squats. It can be press ups. It can be, there's loads of things that you can do just by using your own body weight as the weight. But then you can use resistance bands. You can use dumbbells. There's all sorts of things you can do, but you have to focus on eating protein to then help those muscles recover. But it has to be something that challenges, they're supposed to hurt, right? If you've done a good workout, that muscle should be tender. Because then you need to make sure that you're going through the process to repair that properly, have rest days, make sure you're eating lots of protein. And you will find that you will just start to keep that definition in your arms and less of that sort of like, because the skin does start to sag, and ultimately our bodies will get older. You can't stop your body getting older, but you can slow down some of these aging processes that naturally kick in. And especially when your estrogen does start to go up and down, it's when it starts to drop that then exacerbates this muscle loss and the loss in bone density. So for women of any ages, but especially if you are 35 plus, start doing any form of exercise that challenges your muscles twice a week, ideally for an hour. It can be 30 minutes 4 times a week, but try and get 2 hours in a week.
Yeah. And you can do that at any time of the day.
Yeah.
Because we have spent obviously some time talking about how time constrained a lot of people are, but you just have to replace that time. What are you doing with that time? Yeah. And can you spend 20 minutes doing some squats or do some press ups or do some bad work, and you'll feel the benefit of that. You're getting your diet sorted, so you're feeling less fatigued. Because it does.
They all interplay with each other. It all
interplays. If you feel fatigued, you're less inclined to want to go exercise.
If you've not had a good night's sleep and you wake up with sugar cravings, the last thing you're going to want to do is like get up and go to the gym and exercise. But then when you start getting one of these areas nailed, you'll realise you'll naturally want to start getting the other sorted, because you'll be like, wow, my sleep's so much better and I've suddenly got energy to get up and go for a run in the morning, and then I feel really hungry, so I want a big breakfast, and they all the pieces start to sort of shift into place. Then none of these things are things that we should look at in isolation. It's often about looking at the one that you think you'll get the most early gains from. Like if you're sleeping 5 hours a night, it's like get that sorted, get it to 5.5, get it to 6, get it to 6.5, and work your way. Just get that bedtime earlier and earlier until you're hitting 7, 8 hours. And the difference a good night's sleep makes. I know how awful I feel after a rubbish night. I just feel absolutely dreadful.
And you're not through the end of that. I mean, you have a very young family.
Yeah.
So the things that you're talking about now is you today. Yeah. So it's not like you've been through it or you've got...
Which is good. So sleep is nailed. But they came in at 5:30 this morning, yelling morning at me. It was great.
Just wanted the extra half an hour.
I did. I sent them off to play in the room. But I know that's the routine we've set. They are early wakers, so that's why I go to bed at 9:30, because it's like, well, if I go to bed at 11 and they're up at 5:30, that's not going to work.
So you have to amend your lifestyle. Yeah. Because there's more important things than scrolling.
Yeah.
So when you have these things sorted, you mentioned that you've helped 5 women get pregnant.
In the last year, yeah.
In the last year? Yeah. Okay, that's pretty local hero-y to me, if I think about it. Okay, those are the important things, aren't they? So without going into the personal details of people, because that's not appropriate, but I just wanted to say, was there a common theme for those women who weren't able to get pregnant, or were they all environmental or different? Or
they all had different background root causes into why they were having challenges. And we did testing for 3 of them. We did hormone testing because there was an issue with their cycle. Cycles are too short. We needed to get those cycles.
So that was common. So that was common, was it?
Yeah, that aspect was.
Yeah.
One client was struggling more with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. One client had been struggling to stay pregnant. She was having recurrent miscarriages. So she was getting pregnant but not staying pregnant. So there's all these different... Is it the...
stress as well? There must be stress associated with that.
There was, and obviously they go hand in hand, because the more challenges you have, the stress goes up. But very targeted supplementation, looking at their diet. We actually took out quite a lot of supplements with some of them. They were trying every bottle of supplement in Holden Barrett under the sun. So we sort of like started again with all of that. Testing is obviously really important with any sort of infertility or fertility challenges. You have to do testing to find out if there are any underlying causes, any sort of physiological challenges, hormone challenges. So testing is very, very important. So they were all different. All 5 of them were different. There were some similarities, but all 5 had slightly different root causes as to where we believe. And obviously you don't know. It might be that... I believe that the interventions that we did, given that obviously they all got pregnant and stayed pregnant, and they've all had their babies now. So yeah. And that was just getting a photo of a client's baby. It's just like, it's just magical. It really was. It was absolutely fun. So I think that's where I will go. I will enter back into the nutrition world. I think I will go back into and just focus on fertility, because I avoided it initially because I thought there's so much riding on it.
Yeah.
And it scared me. I was like, oh my word, what if it doesn't work? And obviously sometimes it might not. It's the circumstances are different, and unfortunately some people do struggle and they aren't successful, which is very, very sad. But I feel that I've had success in that area, so I think I will probably, when I do, have a second stab at this.
So anyone listening, even though we're going to divert away a little bit, aren't we, from running your self-employed business, basically, what this is. What we're going to do is say, well, people can still get hold of you, or certainly go through your Instagram and website. Yeah, I'm assuming. Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll put all the links into this.
Absolutely.
So the sad thing is about all of these things is that you have this massive passion and wealth of knowledge, and we could talk probably for 17 hours about everything, to trying to help people, because ultimately this is what it's about, isn't it? It's about helping people as much as you possibly can. And permanent brain fog and stress isn't necessarily the norm. No. Right? It doesn't have to be, does it? So there are things that we can do, especially in this environment where, again, everything is on your phone, constantly scrolling, constantly looking TV, constant, right? So there are some common sense steps that people can take, but then there are going to be very specific things that women should be doing for that longevity.
Yeah.
Just in terms of where we are then. So although you're maintaining your expertise in this, what you found is the challenge of being successful from day one.
Yeah.
Apostrophe is what measures success, I
Yeah.
guess. But it's about you have to do the right thing for the family and yourself, don't you?
Absolutely.
So what you're doing is you're not necessarily parking the expertise in women's health. What you're trying to do is to say, I need to support my family here.
Yes.
Because it takes a long time. There's a lot of clicks. It takes a long time for people to come and find you. A lot of people have to come and find you proactively, don't they?
Yeah,
because you're not necessarily referred to by the general practices.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't refer you, do you?
It's all off my own back.
You all have to do it on your own back,
yeah.
And one of the downsides of this, which is an irony, I think, is in order to be able to get your message across on social media, you have to be on social media. 15 hours a day. You got to remember we had the conversation a couple of years ago about how are you going to start getting more views and more likes and people listening to the content. And so unfortunately, the only way through these channels is to like everything, comment everything, tell all your friends. I got
totally exhausted.
And you're getting, and that's the strange, perverse thing about it is because that's all you're doing, and it's terrible for your health.
I mean, what you're supposed to do is, if you need Instagram for business, you're supposed to very much focus on create and then get out, put your stuff out there. But then you have to be there to engage. If you're asking people to respond and engage and answer polls and answer questions that you've put. I think I got to a point where I was so exhausted by that. And the thought of going into Instagram. And I think the interesting thing, I was saying this to my husband, it got to the point where every time I saw something that I literally, I remember walking to the train station, it was really early and the sun was rising and it looked beautiful and I was just looking at it. The first thing that came into my head, I was like, oh, I could put this on Instagram. And I was like, I don't want to be the kind of person that every experience that I have, I feel like I then need to share it. But that you end up in that mentality that everything, I was making dinner, I'd be like, let me just grab my phone and take a photo. And I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I felt that so strongly. I want to just be living my life and for me to have my own experiences and to keep them for myself. I don't want to feel like I need to share everything on. Here's a meal I made. Here's a sunset I saw. It's just, it just took all the fun out of it. And I think it got to a point where the business was plodding along. There were good months and bad months, but I think because of where we are, young family, big mortgage, husband self-employed, cost of living crisis, it just felt right to be going, maybe now isn't the right time for me to be fully self-employed. So I've taken a decision to step away. Don't know how long that's going to be for. And I'm still going to obviously keep everything, my qualifications. I'm still going to stay registered and do all of my CPD and all the rest of it. But it's going to become a passion, hobby again, briefly for a while. Who knows? And then we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, you have to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
Because by not doing that, you were beginning to stress as well, So having that.
We're saying, do as I say, not as I do. And I was like, I mean, I've never been someone that I would never work late into the evening. Just purely, I can't. My brain just won't let me.
Yeah.
So I was always very boundaried, but I wasn't willing to be that self-employed person who is. I know plenty of them. They're logged in till midnight, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. That is not why I went into this. I need to find a way, at some stage, whenever that may be, to make this work for me. And I wasn't gonna. Some people stay self-employed for too long, and they end up in the worst. I didn't have more holidays. My work-life balance wasn't as good. I wasn't exercising, or all these self-employed people on Instagram that make it look like it's the best thing in the world. I'm sure there's a lot of them out there, but equally, I know plenty of self-employed people who are just burnt out.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, in one of the podcasts we did before, we had this similar conversation about that. How many people who are potentially freelance, who are in the market, hyper skilled, have really tried hard, it's just not going to be there. Well, there is an opportunity for your own mental well-being.
Yeah, exactly.
Apply those skills in something else. If it's stability you need at that point, then go and do that. Being self-employed all the time is not necessarily the answer. No. You know, where you flog yourself to death.
Exactly. Yeah.
In terms of that.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's a whole new subject which we could talk about there, but it is a common theme, by the way, which I'm finding through these podcasts, that there is that. You have to have the approach of never giving in, but at the same time, you have to realise the cost of that. There's always a cost. Yeah. And so I think the great thing about the skill that you have is it is something that you are qualified in. Mm-hmm. You're super good at it. It just means that right now, today, it's not quite working. It doesn't invalidate your qualifications at all. In fact, I'm hoping that coming out of this, more people will get hold of you somehow, because it's the work that you're doing for women is so important. And I haven't heard anybody really talking about the tribulations as much as you have. I haven't seen anything about it. So hopefully that can continue. But just taking the strength and the risk that you took, especially just as you were pregnant as well, by the way, that you made the decision to go for it. Mm-hmm. You have made it a success. It's not. Thank you. You have made it a success. Yeah. It is super good. It just so happens just at this point you just need an extra bit of money coming in. Yeah, that's just the challenge, right? So don't be afraid to go for it. Yeah. And if you need to go and get an extra bit of money, go get it. And the impact I know that you've had on women is. That will be with them for the rest of their lives, and Lucy. That's it. The last 2.5 years have been fulfilling in so many ways, and I feel so privileged to have had that experience. But like you said, this is very much, it's just timing. Yeah. It's the timing that's just right now. It's just not quite right. Yeah, I understand. Well, you have to sell a lot of courses and a lot of everything else in order to be able to get the revenue. But that's reality, and we're dealing with on this podcast reality, real people, in real lives with real businesses, real sports people, and the challenges that can have. You know, but listen, Lucy, I think I know that you've got to get to your family, haven't you, as well, and all that. So look, I think it would be great if we could get you on again at some point. Absolutely. But especially around what you've done for those women this year, that does make you a local hero. Thank you very much. That's so lovely.